97, 98, 99, 100. When you can throw weight around like it's nothing, you need a heavy racket. In this video, I'm going to tell you my top 5. Today, I'm going to be going through my top 5 heavy tennis rackets. Now, a couple of caveats to put in here. What do I mean by heavy? I'm talking about an unstrung weight that's advertised at 310 grams or higher. Actually, it's heavier than 305 because there aren't really any rackets that have an advertised weight between 305 and 310, but things that are at 305, I'm thinking Puro 98, blades, 305 grams, the 98s and the blades. They're great rackets. I don't think they're really necessarily heavy rackets, which is why I've taken those out and jumped to that 310 mark and above. There's a whole range here across different styles of racket. I'm gonna go through what I think are the most playable and give you the most benefits that a heavy racket can give you in my list. Now, why would you want to use a heavy racket? And it's quite simple. More mass going into that ball gives you more force. You can hit the ball harder. Equally, if you're receiving a fast ball, the mass of the racket absorbs the shock. One of the most common tennis elbow issues is not a racket that's too heavy, it's a racket that's too light. It doesn't have the mass in the frame. So when you're taking those big impacts from the ball being hit hard from the other end, instead of the mass of the racket absorbing the shock, it becomes your arm, your elbow, your wrist, your shoulder, leading to injury. Equally, if you are using a heavy racket, you've got to get it moving, especially in things like first serves. You need maneuverability. You've got to be able to whip it around and flick it around when necessary. So if you're not strong enough to use it, it will again lead to kind of later contacts, can lead to some injuries. And this is where you've got to find the trade-off. We often say you want to try and find the heaviest racket that you can use. So rather than just going heavier and heavier for heavier sake, it's got to be one that you are able to control, manipulate and benefit from to get those gains. So, without further ado, let's get into my top 5 heavy tennis rackets. Now I have an honourable mention, and it has to be the Yonex Regna 98. Now why is it an honourable mention? Well, it's because you cannot get it, it's so hard to get. We've managed to just get our hands on this one. We only get to use it occasionally, and they're only really available in Japan, and they're made in such small quantities. It's really sought after. It was available in America for a bit. Now it's only in Japan, and I believe it's only like maybe 300 a month that are made. So very difficult to get, but if you can, it is brilliant. And arguably it would be number 1 on my list because it is that good. Yonex is like put their crack team on it, and it is the best manufacturers, the best designers to ensure that this racket plays amazingly. And how does it play? It's kind of like a quality control frame that still has power, it still has spin, and still has comfort, but that's clearly its predominant factor is control. And when you really take like long, fast swings at the ball, like really chopping at it, it gives you so much feedback and so much control back that it almost feels like you can't miss, which is all we ever really want in a tennis racket. In terms of the rest of the Yonex range, I would maybe put it sort of between like a Percept 97 and a V-Core 98. I would say, so it's that kind of control precision racket and that slightly higher weight, kind of sitting in between, not as cushiony as the Percept, not as spinny or as all round as the V-Core. So the Regna 98, probably the best racket Yonex make, which is why it has to be an honourable mention here. It is a great, great racket. If you ever get a chance to use one or buy one, I highly recommend it. In at number 5, from head, Djokovic has just won the Olympic gold to complete the entire career slam, so it's only right that I have the head speed legend. It's the Pro, of course, for the weight, it's 310 grams. And the reason why this is in is because it is unusual in that 310 weight category, and it still has the 100 square inch head, so it's still very playable. The balance point is 310, so it's definitely more of a control style frame, which makes the 100 square inch head a little bit unusual. I think it could be even better if it had a 16-19 string pattern. This is an 18-20, so it makes it a little bit too, even more of a control frame. And the kind of the Speed MP, it's so fun and kind of maneuverable and whippy. And one of the benefits of that is that 16-19 string pattern, which you lose in the Pro as you gain that weight. Obviously, lots of these heavy rackets are going to be designed for kind of more performance players. They're more player frames, more control orientated, which is why that string pattern tends to change. But the Speed Pro Legend is in at number 5, my top 5 heavy rackets. In at number 4, we have another entry from Head. Quite unusual to have 2 brands at the start of one of these top 5s, but we have the Prestige, and all the Prestiges are heavy. That's kind of their thing. The one that I have picked out as my personal favourite is the Prestige Tour. Now this is a 95 square inch head, so on paper should be so difficult to use, 315 grams, 95 square inch head, but they've given it a 16-19 string pattern, makes it a bit more playable. The balance point, 315, so yes, slightly kind of control orientated, but not kind of as extreme as that Speed Pro was. And the beauty of this racket, and why I've picked it out, is it doesn't play like a 95. It plays generally like it's sort of 97, 98, like a standard kind of control frame. But because it's 95, when you nail it with that 315 gram weight behind you, in the middle of that 95 square inch head, it feels amazing. And it's surprisingly maneuverable despite the weight. And it's just a really, really nice racket. It's definitely, in my opinion, the best Prestige of the whole collection. The collection is a little bit of a mess. They've all have different weights and head sizes and balance points, which is why it was a little bit of a challenge to pick out the ones that we really liked. But the Prestige Tour plays better than it should, given those specs. And that is why it has made it as number 4 on my list. In at number 3, we have the Yonex Percept 97. This is also affectionately known as the Percy. And the 97 is kind of the main racket in this range. There is 97D, 70 heavier, 97H, there's the 100D, and I did consider all of them, but when it push came to shove, I picked the 97 for a couple of reasons. It's like playing with a cushion. It's so soft, it's like a sponge. Every impact, it's like comfort. It's the most comfortable racket of this sort of spec. You've got like the Clash, which is super bendy and flexible and comfortable as well. But in this sort of more player's frame at 315 grams, 310 balance point, it is just a delight to play with. And it's so controllable. You can really throw your hands at the ball and the racket really feels like it's kind of cupped itself around it. So much dwell time. The ball is pocketed on the strings and it's that kind of cushion effect that is just a delight to play with. The Percept obviously took over from the V-Core Pro in terms of the name, and they have not disappointed. All of the Percept range is lovely for that very reason, so comfortable and so flexible. But my number 3, I almost forgot which number I was on, heavy rackets, the Percept 97, 315 grams, 310 balance point, another 16-19 string pattern. You'll start to see that that's kind of my preferred string pattern. Here it is, a great option. In at number 2, we have from Babolat, the Pure Strike 97. Now I said earlier, the Pure Aero 98 is my actually preferred Babolat racket in their sort of tour spec range, but a 305 gram doesn't make the cut. So the Pure Strike, which is a closely run second in that Babolat video, which we did between the Pure Drive 98, Pure Strike 97 and Pure Aero 98. So if you want to see it, check it out. The Pure Strike 97, obviously 97 square inch head. String pattern, slightly different, it's a 1620, so it's a little bit denser than that kind of more traditional 1619, but not all that way to the 1820, which makes it a little bit softer, a little bit more playable because you've got a bit more of an open string pattern. Now, again, similar to other rackets that I've talked about, the Pure Strike doesn't play like a 97. It's very maneuverable, it's very fun, you can throw it around. Similar to the Percept, it's quite cushioned and quite comfortable, much more so than the previous generation, but its main characteristic is maneuverability. You can get it around, you can move it around, and even though it's at 310 grams, it doesn't feel like it. And I think that's some of the beauty of the heavy racket, where you have that stability and mass behind you, but when you're actually attacking and going for it and using that kind of control element, it doesn't then feel heavy. You don't feel like you're lugging something around. And that is why the Pure Strike 97 is so good. It's why I'd always be happy to use one. and it is why it is number 2 in my top 5 heavy rackets list. There you have it, Pure Strike 97. In at number 1, this was a tightly run thing, and I actually had 2 options. Both the same brand, both the same family. So I'm going to tell you what it is. The Wilson Pro Staff, but which one? Is it the 97, the traditional 315 gram 97 square inch Pro Staff, or is it the new one, the Pretender, the X? And I can tell you, it is the Pretender, it is the X. The Pro Staff X is such a great racket. And that's partly because it's unusual. 315 gram, 100 square inch head. No one else really does that. Obviously we had at the very start, the Pro, Speed Pro at 310 gram with the 100 square inch head, but this Pro Staff X, that even heavier mark at the 315 grams, although in the precision range of a Pro Staff, the amount of spin, amount of comfort and power and counter punching ability the X gives you is phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying it's a better racket than 97, because on paper and in generally as a player's frame, the 97 is better, but I prefer the X because of that extra open string pattern from being in the 100 square inch head. You generate a little bit more spin, and I find that a lot more forgiving when I'm playing, even though I like to play the ball quite flat, and obviously the Pro Staff assists with that. When you do need to give it some shape and give it some spin, the X really works with you, similarly to actually the Blade 100, another Wilson racket, but not heavy enough for this list. So if you're looking for a heavy racket, you really have to consider the Pro Staff. All the ones that I've gone through, again, you would consider, but you kind of have to have gone through a Pro Staff 97, a Pro Staff X, and maybe even the RF, the 340 gram big Roger Federer one. Issue of that for a lot of people, it's just too heavy. It's too Roger Federer spec, and you're going to be better off dropping down to that 97, or even my preferred, the Pro Staff X, the best heavy tennis racket on the market at the moment. So there you have it, my top 5 heavy tennis rackets, and here they are with me. So if you're a big, strong tennis player who likes to get some mass behind their shots, these are the rackets you should be checking out. Of course, if you are using this sort of tennis racket, you need to be very careful about the string that you use and how that corresponds. If you've got a heavy thin beam racket and you put a stiff, tight string in, it's going to really impact and level up the amount of force being generated and the amount of G-force and shock that you're creating. So you'll be really careful that you're strong enough to handle it. Equally, if you're using one of these heavy rackets and then using a softer string, maybe you should just not bother going for the heavy racket in the first place at all. Again, if you are the sort of player looking at these rackets, your chances are you're competing at a decent level, you're going to need 2, 3, 4 of these frames. So it's imperative that you demo them, that you try them out and ensure that you're getting one that matches your play style. I've given you my best ideas, but it ultimately is up to you to pick the best racket that will emphasize the strengths and cover up maybe some weaknesses in your game. If you enjoyed my top 5 heavy rackets video, please let me know in the comments. Give me your top 5. Disagree with me. Although I already know that I'm right because it's my personal opinion. It's completely subjective and I can say what I like, as you can in the comments too. So please let me know. What do you think I've got right? What do you think I've got wrong? Is there any that I've missed off completely? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Thank you very much for watching. If you've watched all the way to the end, congratulations. You're one of only about 30% of people who start watching our videos who watch the whole way through. So it's very kind of you. Please, if you haven't, like and subscribe as always. Leave me a comment. I will get back to you as quickly as I can, and we'll see you on the next video.